You've entered the archives of the forgotten. I'm Dr. Haunted. Tonight I'll show you what was never meant to be seen. Just remember, once you know the truth, you can't unsee it. Working harvest season at the Donnelly farm was supposed to be temporary. Just enough money to pay for my senior year of college. The pay was good, the work was honest, and I'd grown up around farming equipment. What could go wrong? Old man Donnelly walked me through the cornfields on my first day, pointing out irrigation lines and explaining harvest schedules. We start at dawn, finish by sunset, he said, his weathered hands gesturing toward endless rows of golden stalks. Never work alone in the far fields and always check in every 2 hours. Those safety rules seemed excessive for routine farm work, but I followed them religiously. The corn was ready for harvest, standing 8 feet tall in perfect geometric rows that stretched to the horizon. My third week on the job, I was assigned to Section 7, the furthest field from the main house. My partner called in sick, but we were behind schedule and needed every available hour before the weather turned. Just for today, Donnelly said reluctantly. Stay on the marked paths, keep your radio on, and head back if anything feels wrong. The morning went smoothly. My harvester moved through the corn rows efficiently, collecting grain while the stalks fell in neat patterns behind me. The work was meditative, just me, the machine, and endless corridors of rustling corn. Around noon, I stopped for lunch in a small clearing. That's when I first heard it. Another harvester running somewhere nearby. The engine sound was distinct, older, rougher than my modern equipment. Someone else was working Section 7. I radioed Donnelly. Who else is out here? I can hear another machine. Static answered me, then nobody else scheduled for Section 7 today. You sure about what you're hearing? The engine sounds continued, steady, methodical, growing closer. I climbed onto my harvester's cab to get a better view over the corn. Nothing visible, but the sounds were definitely real. I resumed work, assuming another crew was in an adjacent section. But throughout the afternoon, the phantom harvester seemed to follow my movements, always just out of sight behind the next row of corn. At 4 p.m. I found the first evidence, a perfectly harvested strip running parallel to my own work. The stalks were cut clean, grain collected efficiently, but no tire tracks marked the soil. No machine had passed through, yet the corn was harvested by expert hands. I followed the mysterious harvest line for half a mile. The work was flawless, better than anything modern equipment could achieve. Every stalk cut at the optimal height, every grain collected without waste. That evening, I asked Donnelly about the farm's history. His expression darkened. Section 7 was where Tommy Brennan worked, he said quietly. Best harvest hand I ever employed. Been running those fields for 30 years when the accident happened. Tommy had died in 1987 when his old harvester overturned in soft soil. He'd been working alone, trying to finish the section before a storm hit. They found him 3 days later, still clutching the steering wheel, surrounded by perfectly harvested corn he'd completed with his dying breath. Tommy loved this farm more than his own family, Donnelly continued. He'd work 16-hour days during harvest season, never missed a deadline, never left a job unfinished. Death couldn't end that kind of dedication. The next morning, I requested a different section, but Donnelly shook his head. Tommy's accepted you as his partner. That's rare. He's particular about who he works with. I returned to Section 7 with new understanding. When the phantom harvester sounds began, I acknowledged them. Morning, Tommy. Ready for another day? The engine sounds seemed to grow more cheerful, more coordinated with my own machine's rhythm. Working alongside Tommy became the most efficient harvest season of my career. His invisible expertise guided my decisions when to adjust cutting height, where soil conditions were tricky, which areas needed extra attention. Other workers began requesting Section 7, but the phantom harvester only appeared for me. Tommy had chosen his living partner carefully, ensuring his beloved fields received the care they deserved. I returned every harvest season for the next 4 years, collaborating with the best farmhand who ever lived. Tommy's dedication had transcended death, ensuring the Donnelly farm maintained its reputation for perfect harvests. Some workers retire when their bodies give out. Others find ways to continue their calling beyond physical limitations, proving that true expertise is immortal. The old Hartwell property had been abandoned for 20 years when we bought it. 50 acres of prime farmland, including a massive cornfield that stretched from the farmhouse to the county road. My wife and I planned to restore the fields and build our dream home where the old house once stood. Local kids had been using the cornfield as a playground for years, building forts, playing hide and seek, creating elaborate mazes through the overgrown stalks. The corn had gone wild without proper farming, creating dense walls perfect for childhood adventures. We didn't mind the kids playing there. Better to have the land used than sitting empty. But parents started asking us to post no trespassing signs after children began coming home with disturbing stories. There are other kids out there who don't want to be friends, 7-year-old Katie Morrison told her mother. They hide really good and make scary noises when we try to find them. More reports followed. Children described playmates who couldn't be seen clearly. Voices calling from deep within the corn rows. Games of tag where it never revealed themselves. I decided to investigate one afternoon when I heard laughter echoing from the cornfield. High-pitched giggles and excited shouts suggested a group of kids having fun, but no parents had mentioned children playing there that day. I followed the sounds into the maze of corn stalks, expecting to find neighborhood kids engaged in some elaborate game. The voices stayed just ahead of me, always around the next turn, always just out of sight. "Hello," I called. "Anyone out there?" The laughter stopped instantly. The cornfield fell silent except for wind rustling through the stalks. I searched for another hour, finding evidence of recent activity, trampled paths, small clearings where children had obviously been playing, but no actual kids. Whoever had been out there had vanished completely. That evening, I researched the Hartwell property's history and found the tragedy that explained everything. In 1952, 4 children had gotten lost in the cornfield during a game of hide and seek. A late-season blizzard hit while they were playing, and search parties couldn't locate them until spring. The children, ages 6 to 9, had died of exposure, huddled together in a small clearing deep within the maze of corn. They'd been trying to keep each other warm while waiting for rescue that came too late. Local folklore claimed the children's spirits remained in the cornfield, continuing their eternal game of hide and seek. New children who entered their domain were invited to play, but the rules were different now. I posted the no trespassing signs as requested, but they didn't stop the phantom voices. Every afternoon around 3 p.m, I'd hear children laughing and playing in the abandoned cornfield. The sounds were joyful, innocent, nothing threatening or malicious. But parents remained concerned when their children described new friends who only appeared in the corn rows, who knew the best hiding spots, who wanted to play games that never seemed to end. I began monitoring the field more carefully, watching for patterns in the mysterious activity. The phantom children were most active during golden hour, that magical time when sunlight slanted through corn stalks, creating natural cathedrals of light and shadow. One evening I heard a child crying deep within the cornfield. Not playful sounds, but genuine distress, someone lost and frightened. I grabbed a flashlight and plunged into the maze, following the sobs. I found 8-year-old Marcus Chen wandering in circles, tears streaming down his face. He'd been playing with friends who'd abandoned him when they heard their parents calling for dinner. "I can't find the way out," he sobbed. The corn all looks the same. As I led Marcus towards safety, I heard other voices, children's voices offering encouragement and guidance. "This way," they whispered. "Follow the trampled path. You're almost home." The phantom children were helping us navigate their domain, ensuring no other child would suffer their fate of being lost in the corn maze forever. Marcus's parents thanked me profusely, but I knew the real heroes were the 4 children who'd transformed their tragedy into eternal protection for other kids who entered their playground. I stopped trying to keep children away from the cornfield. Instead, I created official rules. No playing alone. Always tell parents your location, and listen carefully to helpful voices that guide lost children home. The phantom children have been playing in that cornfield for 70 years, maintaining their eternal game while ensuring no other child experiences the terror of being permanently lost. Some children outgrow their favorite playgrounds. Others find ways to keep the games alive forever, transforming tragedy into protection and ensuring their domain remains a place of joy rather than sorrow. Maintaining the Johnson family's corn maze was my summer job between college semesters. Every October, they transformed their cornfield into an elaborate Halloween attraction, complete with themed sections, hidden passages, and strategically placed scarecrows to enhance the spooky atmosphere. My job was simple: maintain the paths, repair damaged stalks, and ensure the scarecrows stayed properly positioned throughout the maze. The pay was decent, and I enjoyed working outdoors in the peaceful cornfield. There were 12 scarecrows total, each handcrafted by Mrs. Johnson with authentic period clothing and realistic facial features. She'd positioned them at key intersections throughout the maze, creating focal points that guided visitors along the intended route. The centerpiece was Old Pete, a 7-foot scarecrow dressed in overalls and a wide-brimmed hat, positioned at the maze's heart. Mrs. Johnson had crafted him with particular care, using her late husband's actual work clothes and filling him with corn husks from their own harvest. "Pete looks just like my grandfather," she'd explained proudly. "He worked these fields for 60 years. Now he can watch over them forever." My first week went smoothly. I'd arrive each morning, walk the maze checking for overnight damage, and ensure all scarecrows remained in their assigned positions. The work was meditative, surrounded by golden cornstalks and the gentle rustle of wind through the maze. Then I started noticing inconsistencies. Scarecrows I'd checked the previous evening would be facing different directions in the morning. Not dramatically different, just slight rotations, as if they'd turned their heads to watch something pass by. I assumed wind or settling was causing the movements. Scarecrows aren't built to remain perfectly rigid. Normal weathering would cause gradual shifts in position, but the changes became more pronounced. Scarecrows positioned at path intersections would be found standing in different locations entirely, still within their general areas, but moved several feet from their original spots. Most unsettling was Old Pete. Every morning I'd find him facing toward the maze entrance, as if watching for visitors who wouldn't arrive for months. His posture seemed alert, vigilant, not the passive stance of traditional scarecrows. I mentioned the movements to Mrs. Johnson. She smiled knowingly. "Grandfather Pete was always protective of this land," she said. "He'd walk the fields every morning and evening, checking for problems, making sure everything was as it should be. Old habits die hard." The implication was clear. Old Pete wasn't just decorated with her grandfather's clothes. He was somehow animated by Peter Johnson's spirit, continuing his lifelong vigil over the family farm. I began paying closer attention to the scarecrow's behavior. They weren't moving randomly. They were patrolling. Each morning, they'd be positioned to observe different sections of the maze as if conducting systematic surveillance of their territory. Old Pete served as the coordinator, his position indicating which areas required attention. When crows threatened the corn, scarecrows would be found guarding those specific rows. When teenagers tried to vandalize the maze, the scarecrows would cluster around the damaged areas like security guards responding to an incident. One evening, I decided to test my theory. I hid in the cornfield after sunset, watching the scarecrows through night vision binoculars I'd brought from home. At first, nothing happened. The scarecrows stood motionless in the darkness, looking exactly like the inanimate decorations they were supposed to be. Then, as the clock struck midnight, old Pete moved. It wasn't dramatic or supernatural looking. He simply turned his head toward a distant section of the maze, then began walking with slow, deliberate steps. His movements were stiff but purposeful, exactly how an elderly farmer might move through familiar fields. The other scarecrows followed suit, each taking assigned routes through their designated sections. They moved like patrol guards, checking paths, examining cornstalks, ensuring everything was secure for the night. I watched them complete their rounds over the course of 2 hours. They investigated every corner of the maze, repositioned fallen stalks, and returned to strategic positions before dawn. The scarecrows weren't just decorations. They were the night shift security team, led by a farmer whose dedication to his land had transcended death itself. I stopped trying to keep the scarecrows in their assigned positions. Instead, I worked with their patrol schedule, maintaining areas they'd identified as problematic and trusting their supernatural expertise. The corn maze became the most successful attraction in the county. Visitors commented on how authentic the scarecrows looked, how they seemed to be actually watching, how the maze felt protected and well maintained. Mrs. Johnson knew her grandfather's spirit lived on in old Pete, ensuring the family farm remained productive and secure. Death hadn't ended Peter Johnson's farming career. It had simply expanded his hours to include overnight shifts. Some farmers retire when age catches up with them. Others find ways to continue their calling beyond physical limitations, proving that true dedication to the land is immortal. That concludes tonight's case. But the shadows don't sleep. I'm Dr. Haunted. Until next time, keep your doors locked, your lights low, and your nightmares closer.